To have the respect and affection of other people is one of the most important things in life.
You guys are investing in the arts. Y'all want to invest in the school in Brazil. Y'all want to go to Africa. I'm standing up and I'm telling you, I am Warhol. I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation.
Yet we don't think about it much, except when we're outside of the group, wanting to belong.
I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Walt Disney, Nike, Google. Now who's gonna be the Medici family and stand up and let me create more? Or do you want to marginalize me till I'm out of my moment?
He was entering a world where everything was strange and everyone might be hostile. He had to learn new ways of doing things, to overcome the differences in attitudes, language, and customs that set him apart from the group.
In a video that will now live in infamy, rapper Kanye West said the continuation of slavery for hundreds of years looks like a choice in his eyes.
When you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. It's like slavery, Holocaust Jews, slavery is blacks. So prison is something that unites us as one race, blacks and whites being one race. That we're one, we're the human race, we're human beings and stuff. And then eventually, you know,
Without applying any analytical thinking skills to the historical data, West seemed to defend himself from criticisms about his support for Donald Trump by misleading people about the role of white capital in the continuation of slavery. Kanye West seems to be trying to bargain his way into the boardrooms and backrooms of white capital by offering up black people's lineage in this country. Kanye West wants to make decisions about the flow of billions of dollars.
Then you got people overcharge you at all times. Then you got your constant public perception being brought down. AG telling you when you gonna tour and when you can't tour. Everybody got an opinion towards you. This industry of what I'm trying to get into, ain't nobody never broke down. Ain't nobody broke down. We all slaves.
The Kanye West of 2016 seems slightly different from the Kanye West of 2018. 2016 Kanye detailed how he was kept from accessing the top level of capitalism. 2018 Kanye is offering up black struggle, erasing black history, and diminishing the savagery suffered by generations of black people in America, so that the owners of a system made to suppress black people will allow him into their world. And in doing so, he is absolving the American government of the massive debt it owes to the descendants of American chattel slavery.
By 1860, plantations reached from Virginia to Texas. On some of these, tobacco was produced. On others, sugar was grown. On others, cotton was the main crop.
The statements by Kanye West appear to be meant to erase the standing that native black descendants of slaves have as a creditor of the United States in exchange for entering the parts of American capitalism he's been barred from accessing. On their face, Kanye West's comments are plainly wrong. He's insinuating that black people, given the numbers, should have rebelled more effectively and should have done so in a way which would have ended the worldwide conveyor belt of savagery. History tells us that there were many slave rebellions.
Among the 50,000 slaves a year that ran away, probably not more than 1 or 2,000 made it to freedom in the North.
But reaching the North didn't guarantee a slave's freedom. Watkins, like all runaways, was still a fugitive, and now a target for northern slave catchers. who are just as violent as Southern slave catchers.
Thousands of slaves escaped per year. The system of slavery, however, was created to prevent any successful slave rebellion from concluding with the freedom of all slaves in America. Almost all of these runaway attempts failed, partly because of an elaborate system modified and improved by each generation of white slave owners. To understand slavery, one has to understand how governments and laws worked to protect the use of black bodies for profit, and how militias like slave patrols worked to build the wealth of nations.
From generation to generation, whites have refined and passed along a system to control their slaves. And for the most part, it has kept rebellion at bay. Yet for some, the memory of the Stono Rebellion will not go away.
On a daily basis, they were in danger. And then that helps us to understand the almost military organization of Southern society.
The Stono Rebellion was one of the most serious rebellions in early American history, and it produced a powerful response on the part of the white community. It necessitated a change in the slave code.
The legislature passes the Negro Act of 1740, which cracks down on the few liberties remaining for black Carolinians. They can no longer assemble in groups, grow their own food, or move about without a pass. And to enforce the new law, the white community calls upon its slave patrols. Citizen patrols are South Carolina's racial police force. Composed of 5 or 6 white men, they roam the countryside on horseback several times a week, looking for slaves without passes. Their goal is to stop runaways and to strike fear into any slave even thinking about running away. Any black person caught without a pass is whipped. In some districts, this means 20 lashes. In others, up to 30. All white men in South Carolina, from poor subsistence farmers to wealthy plantation owners, are required to serve on slave patrols. The patrols work at night when slaves are most likely to run away, and often ride dark horses to give them the advantage of surprise.
The institution of slavery wasn't just a collection of random racists snatching up random black people and forcing them to work the land. It took the tacit approval of the United States government and the governments of Great Britain, Portugal, Spain, France, and others to supply Africans to countries all over the world. Some African countries engaged in catching and selling off members of rival tribes to European slavers. Both Benin and Ghana have apologized for this treacherous practice. The economic engine built the Union itself. And it wasn't just a Southern institution. To name a few examples, New England textile mills and Northern colleges like Brown University all benefited from the wealth generated from the savage system of chattel slavery. To put it plainly, slavery built empires. The transatlantic slave trade involved multiple governments propping up and protecting this savagery. The Brits, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Belgians, the Spanish, as well as white planters in the United States, even before it became the United States, were using black slaves to build their wealth. You'd have to have a juvenile understanding of the system of slavery to think that an entire system would collapse simply by slaves escaping, many of whom didn't speak the same language and may have had no idea where in the world they were or how to get back home. Depending on the time period, they may not have even known where home was.
The acquisition of strategic naval ports, or choke points, marked here in red, was the pivot of the system. By controlling these ports and corresponding sea lanes, the British dominated trade, using colonies such as India or African nations as sources of cheap raw materials and slave labor. Other nations wishing to engage in the same geographical area would have to operate through the British.
Slaves were considered property, and as such, they were trapped in a heinous system. Methods were employed not only to keep them from escaping, but also from killing themselves. Slaves couldn't even control their intake of food. Slaves who tried to kill themselves were tortured. If that torture didn't work, they were force-fed. In addition to the savage practice of slavery, Native Black people have been subjected to the awful laws of Jim Crow, lynchings, black codes, redlining, sundown towns, race riots, debt slavery, convict leasing, vagrancy laws, medical experimentation and discrimination, segregation, predatory lending through subprime mortgages and payday loans, as well as gentrification. The system, maintained by the government, was designed to profit off of the continued suffering of Black people while protecting white communities and white wealth by any means necessary.
And of course, the way that the FHA categorizes risk is by race. And that was not by creditworthiness, not by job or income. It is who lives in the neighborhood and what color are they. And really it was Black and non-Black, because at that point Italians and Irish and all of these other immigrant groups who were non-white before become white by nature of the New Deal, right? So the FHA deems certain races creditworthy and certain races not creditworthy, and it deemed Black communities absolutely, totally risky.
Home ownership is the basis of a happy, contented family life. And now, through the use of a National Housing Act insured mortgage, is brought within the reach of all citizens on a monthly payment plan no greater than rent.
So mortgage credit isn't going into these communities. And by the way, Blacks can't leave the communities because the white communities don't want Black neighbors. Why? Not just because they're racist, but they are also because they don't want their property values to diminish. As soon as Blacks come into their neighborhood, then they are deemed riskier, and so they lose their mortgage insurance.
We all know you wouldn't do anything out of line, Ed.
Out of line? What in heaven's name are you talking about? Some people came to look at my house. They were Negroes. I haven't done anything, yet.
Look, let's face it. If you want to sell your house, I want to sell it for you. That's what I'm here for. That's my business. But there's some things you just can't do. That sign, it's a terrible thing. Sort of an open invitation to anybody. You've been around here long enough to know we don't do things that way.
Now listen.
I've had a dozen people in here would have taken your place. But I didn't let them get as far as you. I've got to consider the community. You're leaving, but there are a lot of us who are going to be here for a long time. Now take a tip from an old friend. Forget this whole thing and let me take care of your house.
And so there's all of these, there's racial covenants, there's violence. This is why Black homes are bombed. I mean, yes, right, this is racism, but it's also economic interest, right? We want to keep our home values. This is the reason today why people don't want Black neighbors. I mean, to be honest, I think that, this cordoning off of schools and risk is very much about this maintaining property values, right? Property owners have often been the policymakers in the country. So you've got this risk pooled into these Black communities. They can't leave. Nobody else wants to come in. So you've got communities of renters and high-risk credit borrowers. And credit becomes money, right? We don't have gold and silver anymore. It's credit. And so our credit score determines our wealth and our ability to accumulate wealth. And so what's happening now is we've got two credit markets, and I call it sort of a Jim Crow credit market, right? You've got white credit, you've got credit cards, you've got mortgage, really cheap mortgages, and in the ghetto, you've got installment credit, which is very, very expensive. Now you have payday lending and check cashing and all of that stuff, and then you had subprime lending afterwards. But you've got very high risk credit, and it's not that there are these like exploiters, these villains, these like sharks coming in the ghetto. It's also because it's more expensive to lend when no one is insuring your risk.
Whether this is a PR stunt gone wrong, or a mental breakdown, or a challenge given to him by the mythical Illuminati doesn't matter. After all, it doesn't matter why someone is driving on the wrong side of the highway at 100 miles an hour. What matters most is the devastating consequences he or she can cause by doing so. What was also exposed by Kanye West were the people who know better, but were looking for a reason to protect their view of Kanye West as a genius.
Well, do you think, I'm trying to get Hollywood's opinion, do you think Kanye's crazy or is he a genius?
Kanye's just being Kanye. I mean, you never know what he means.
Right.
I don't know. He don't know. I know musically he's a genius.
Absolutely.
I just never tried whatever the weed that was. Look, with geniuses, you never know, I mean, I believe some geniuses have done a lot of wild things throughout history. This is just one of those things.
This issue isn't as simple as Kanye being Kanye. His comments on slavery are used to invalidate real discussions about reparative financial actions to the descendants of chattel slavery. What happens if the owners of capital aren't only dismissive of slavery, but also start to rewrite the view of slavery as a voluntary action? Back in 2015, at least one history book in Texas had already been rewritten, referring to chattel slaves as migrant workers, while mentioning the Atlantic slave trade under the immigration section.
Yesterday I posted a picture of my son. He sent me an image from his history book about Africans coming over as workers. And so a lot of people asked me about the book and who the publisher was, and so he has a copy of the book at home. We are in Texas, and so this is a part of the Texas textbook adoption. The Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and the 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. So it is now considered immigration.
A few people were willing to give Kanye West the benefit of the doubt and place some level of blame on the slaves themselves.
400 years and change and nobody fought back? I'm glad Kanye West said that. I'm glad he said it. You know why? Because it's the truth.
Also exposed were people who made proclamations about what they would have done if trapped in similar circumstances. Some of those same people who wouldn't even boycott Netflix are asking us to believe that they would have been brave enough to organize and participate in a slave rebellion. Does Kanye West deserve that much protection? Or are they trying to figure out a way to save the image they have in their minds of Kanye West? Others are genuinely concerned about the physical and mental health of Kanye West, whether his rants are the result of opioid usage or of failing mental health. It's dangerous to dismiss the institution of chattel slavery as a choice. To believe slavery was a choice, you'd have to have no sense of the gravity or the scale of this system. You'd also have to have no understanding of the concept of coercion. You'd have to have no knowledge of history.
Listen, I've got nothing against those people, but why go looking for trouble? Property values in this neighborhood will go to pot if we don't stop what Kant is doing. Now look, Ted, I'm a practical man. You don't work for this bank very long unless you are. Well, I'd like the bank to get word around that... No, strike that out. I hope that you and the bank will reach a policy decision on real estate loans that will reassure the homeowners of this community, and the merchants, and the service companies.
If you're not on my side of the fence, at least sit on it, okay? We'll see.
Black. That's what I thought. Black, like them, I thought. And everything I'd heard as a child came back to me. Don't go near one. Don't go into cellars, even with one you know. You'll be killed. You'll be lying in a ditch dead. You'll be worse.
When you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. We're mentally in prison. We're mentally in prison. We're mentally in prison.
Francois Pinault owns Balenciaga, Puma, Saint Laurent, Stella McCartney. Francois Arnault owns Louis Vuitton, Celine, Givenchy. Renzo Rosso owns Margiela, Diesel, Marni, Victor and Rolf. These guys got factories. These guys have factories. They run that.
He was entering a world where everything was strange and everyone might be hostile. He had to learn new ways of doing things, to overcome the differences in attitudes, language, and customs that set him apart from the group.